just to explain this to you guys again, many corporations, especially Western corporations, left Russia to boycott Russia, like, you know, McDonald's, Instagram, but also big financial giants like Visa, like MasterCard. And the Chinese, they looked at that and they said, you know what? Thank you very much for your market share. We'll take it. And they moved in with UnionPay, and they said, we're going to link UnionPay to MIR, to MIR, which is the Russian payment system. And there's this new report now. This came out just today. This is from Fortune magazine, and they're saying that China's largest credit card brand might be pulling out too. So the question is now, what's happening to UnionPay? What's happening to this great big deal that China is going to link with MIR? Let's take a look, because I was live yesterday, and while I was live, Crazy Puppet was sending me this, and I saw conflicting reports, because I think it was Financial Times. They were saying this is great for China. Yeah, it is, but other places are saying they've decided against it. They've changed their minds. Let's see if that's true. So, when Russia's invasion of Ukraine prompted payments giants Visa and MasterCard to suspend services in the country, Moscow expected it could lean on the Chinese alternative, UnionPay, to plug the holes torn out of its domestic banking system. But that plan appears to have fallen flat, as UnionPay has reportedly decided not to expand its presence in the country, fearing it could become the next target of devastating sanctions. So what are they linking to here? They're linking to the Moscow Times. And the Moscow Times says China's Visa MasterCard alternative, meaning UnionPay, backs away from Russia. Okay, let's see. No thanks. Okay, they're saying China's UnionPay system refused to cooperate with Russia's biggest lender, Sberbank, and suspended talks with other banks for fear of secondary sanctions, the RBC News website reported today. So we're just, I swear, this is exactly how the news works. It's like somebody wrote an article about somebody writing an article about somebody writing an article about something that someone said. So this one's in Russian. This is the source. It's in Russian, and I'll plug it through the translator in a second, but let's just go back to Moscow Times, right? They're saying that Russian banks plan to issue cards using UnionPay after Visa and MasterCard suspended. We get it. We get it, okay? So, quote, the project to issue UnionPay cards is temporarily on hold, RBC quoted one of several unnamed banking sources as saying. They don't officially confirm that it's tied to sanctions, saying it's on pause until further instructions. Now, the article goes on to say that UnionPay also suspended negotiations with other sanctioned banks, including Russia's largest private lender, Alfa Bank, VTB, and Okriti. UnionPay accounted for about 1% of Russian bank cards in 2020, according to retail banking research. So it's not a lot. Demand for UnionPay cards grew tenfold after unprecedented Western sanctions over Russia's war in Ukraine. Now, Russian UnionPay holders have reported difficulties with using the system to make payments in the US, Israel, Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. Russia's central bank reassured Visa and MasterCard holders that the systems will continue to work within Russia until the cards expire. Yeah, that's true. So that was my understanding as well, that basically, if you have a Visa and a MasterCard inside Russia, you can still use it to buy things inside Russia, but it won't work internationally. Russia and China have proclaimed a quote-unquote no-limits friendship on the eve of Moscow's invasion of Ukraine. However, subsequent reports have suggested China's reluctance to run afoul of unprecedented Western sanctions. Now, honestly, this doesn't look like it's a done deal. So this could change. This is nothing confirmed. They haven't come out and said, oh, it's over, this whole plan is in the garbage, it's down the drain. And the other thing, my gut feeling, again, I could be wrong, my gut feeling is that the Chinese don't really care about sanctions. It's not just something that I feel. They've demonstrated that in the past. Because the thing is, when you sanction a country like, Cuba, again, Cuba's done amazing things, has strong resilience. Cuba's been 60 bloody years under an embargo. Look at them. But when you sanction someone like Cuba, it's not the same as sanctioning China, because the US needs China. China is emerging as a contender. It's set to overtake the United States to become the world's #1 economy. It's just a question of time. And we are seeing, of course, with that, the emergence of a multipolar world. So we're going to end up in a world where it's not the United States that's running the show. You will have a multipolar world, not a hyperpower or unipolar hegemon like the US. And so my point is that the Chinese just don't care. They care to an extent, but they are able to shrug off sanctions, if you catch my drift. Now, just going back to what they're saying here in Fortune magazine, again, they're saying the same thing, that Russians could still use Visa and MasterCard to make domestic purchases, owing to Russia's local Mir payment system. Now, again, the significance, another sign that the global South and the evil countries, as the Americans call them, so Russia, China, Iran, so on. Another sign that they were developing alternatives and really taking them seriously was the fact that in the last weeks we saw Venezuela, we saw Iran talking about linking their payment systems to Mir. Okay, so let me summarize. China wants to link UnionPay to Russia's Mir, and Iran and Venezuela want to link their payment systems to Russia's Mir. And this is very serious because before, let's say from 2014 and onwards, when the Russians started de-dollarizing their foreign exchange reserves and buying up more gold, and also, moving away from things like SWIFT, because then China and Russia came up with their own alternatives to SWIFT. They also came up with Mir, and Mir has been successful for domestic payments in Russia. It's more popular and more functional for domestic payments than it is for international payments. But so the fact that now you have Iran and Venezuela talking about hooking into that, that's significant. And it shows that countries are really taking this seriously, this idea of we have to move away from the financial and monetary system that's been imposed and controlled by the West for the better part of the last century. So that's very serious. Now, whether this doesn't, whether this idea of with linking China's UnionPay to Russia's Mir, it falls through, I don't think that's going to change anything. They might come up with something else. That doesn't mean that, they're just going to give up and say, well, yeah, let's just depend on Western corporations and Visa and MasterCard. That's not happening. Because you have no clue. We have no idea when those companies would come back. And I think there's been a real lesson learned. Again, Russia and China, they started wising up to this idea that we have to move away from the West. We can't depend on the West. Already in the last decade. But this is a real game changer in so many ways. I don't want to repeat myself, but we're getting so many new subscribers every day. I feel like I should. And it's not just the payment system. It's, of course, when you look at oil, right? China gets a good chunk of its oil from Saudi Arabia. I think it's about 15% of its oil. And so the idea that Saudi Arabia would sell oil to China, not in US dollars, but in a currency like the renminbi, which is China's currency, the yuan, that's ridiculous because it's unheard of, right? I mean ridiculous in the sense that it's outrageous because usually energy sales, especially oil, they're denominated in the US currency, in the US dollar. And that's why we have something called the petrodollar, where 80%, the vast overwhelming majority of oil sales are done in US dollars. And that's what gives the US dollar its value. Because when you sell oil, which is one of the hottest commodities, one of the basic commodities, you get greenbacks in exchange. You get dead presidents. Do you understand? That's what gives it its value. And so the idea that you would sell it in another currency, it starts giving that currency the value. Because people they start, hey, hold on a second, you're selling oil in renminbi? I want some renminbi. Right? I'm trying to simplify it. Obviously, that's not going to happen from one day to the next, where the US dollar's hegemony is just challenged. You're like flicking a switch. No, but it is setting the world on a different course, and a very serious one, because we've had, in addition to that, India buying oil from Russia in rupees. Have you ever heard of such a thing? When I first saw that, I was like, what? It's not about the quantity. It's just 3 million barrels. 3 million barrels is nothing. India uses more than that in a day. But it's just the principle that they bought that in rupees and rubles. It's crazy. You wouldn't do that usually, right? And then of course, we have the U.S. scrambling for oil. As we've seen, Biden has started releasing some of they call it the strategic reserve. The U.S. has basically piled up millions of barrels of oil. In such an event where the price of oil goes up, they can release oil, and then it's supposed to calm down market prices. It's just a temporary fix. You as the United States, a country like that, which, again, think about this, the US is the top producer of oil in the world, but it consumes so much oil that it still has to import oil from other countries, and that's Russia and Saudi Arabia and others. And so one of those countries that used to give the US oil is Venezuela, but that's changed because of sanctions. since Bush, it's just been getting worse and worse. Bush put sanctions on Venezuela, then Trump, then Obama put more sanctions, then Trump put more sanctions. So right now, Venezuela is screwed because it's not only not exporting oil to the US, it can't export oil globally. Only places like, Iran and China and Russia, they're willing to take the oil, but globally, it's gone. And now we're in a situation where the US has sanctioned Russia, including energy imports. There's a war in Ukraine, so the price of oil has gone up. And now you need oil, you need Venezuelan oil, you need Iranian oil back on the market to calm those prices down. And that's very embarrassing for the US because they've been telling you for years, they've been saying for years that Venezuela is a dictatorship and Maduro's a dictator and they don't recognize him as the president. And now they have to go kiss his ass for oil. So I guess he is the president, right? If he's the guy calling the shots, why are you talking to him then about the oil? Huh? Who's running the show? Obviously it's him. And now they have to do the same thing with Iran. They've been saying Iran is a malign actor and they're evil and they have to be sanctioned. And now they're like, do you mind giving us some of that oil? We'll lift the sanctions. I'm simplifying this for you, but this is very much true. This is very much what's happening, and very much a pretty concise and succinct picture of what's happening. And so when we're seeing things like oil being, sold in currencies denominated in other currencies than the US dollar, this is significant. And when you see China and Venezuela and Iran and Russia working on parallel systems or alternative systems, whether it's a payment system like Mir and UnionPay, or it's an alternative to SWIFT, where, the Chinese and the Russians have their own system, it doesn't mean that from one day to the next, the US and SWIFT and the dollar will become irrelevant. It means that there's going to come a point in time where they're going to have serious competition. And Ukraine has caused that. Ukraine and the political backlash against Russia has caused that. It's the catalyst. And that's what we're moving towards. And that's what you have to understand. So just going back to this story that UnionPay are allegedly backing out, again, that remains to be seen. It hasn't been 100%, it's not 100% dead just yet. And it doesn't mean that we won't see alternatives popping up. I think that's very, very important to explain and to understand.